Hi, all. Your old Steve here. Welcome to another episode of Mead Hall Shorts. And thanks to everybody who voted. It looks like unanimously we're looking for some history. So we're going to do some history. Let's start with a little today in history. So today in history, in 1916, the Dublin Easter Uprising began. The Irish Republican Brotherhood in Dublin sought to start a country nationwide rebellion. And initially it went very well. They were able to seize the provisional government building and also the Dublin post office. But unfortunately, it failed to spread throughout the country like they had hoped, and the British troops were able to squash the rebellion in about a week. Now, the British, unfortunately, followed up with, or maybe fortunately for the Irish, followed up this great victory of theirs with one of their greatest blunders. Despite public sentiment, they took 15 of the ringleaders of the rebellion and had them executed. The remaining leadership of the Irish Republican Brotherhood was now able to use these 15 men as martyrs to the cause. And they did so for the next few years, culminating with the establishment of the Irish Free State in 1922. In 1949, the Irish Republic that we know today was established. Also today, in 1863, the Union Army in the Civil War issued their General Order number 100. General Order number 100 was a 157 articles about treatment of prisoners, and Confederate civilians. Its primary author was a guy named Francis Lieber, who was a Prussian immigrant. And like many families during the American Civil War, he had sons on both sides. One of his sons was killed fighting for the Confederate Army, and two of his sons fought with the Union Army. The 157 articles he issued, while we can argue whether or not the Union Army lived up to the letter of those articles, those 157 articles are still with us today. Many European countries adopted them after the war. Not only that, they served as the basis of what we now know today as the Geneva Conventions. So those 157 articles are still something we talk about. Also today in history, in 1800, Congress allocated $5,000 for the establishment of a Library for Congress. So the Library of Congress started out with an order of books from London in 1801, and then the first official inventory in 1802, 964 books were listed. Today, the Library of Congress encompasses a collection of over 17 million books, and millions of other things like movies, documents, maps, photographs, microfiche, and many, many others. And now, for a little history that I find really interesting and intriguing. I've always had a real interest in Asian cultures. And by Asian cultures, I want to be sure that people understand I'm talking about the cultures, the people. It's very easy to get governments mixed up with the people. So you always want to make sure that you kind of think about that as two separate entities. Governments don't traditionally very well represent their cultures, especially in areas like Asia where there's so many different cultures. Countries like China have literally thousands of different cultures. So when I talk about cultures, I'm talking about the people. It's a really fascinating thing that I ran into once when I was watching a history program or something like that. I don't remember. It might have been a travel program. And this is something really fascinating and you'll have to excuse me if I use some notes because I don't speak Chinese. So I'm going to butcher some languages here. So this, the Fujian region of China. A small mountainous area called Hakka. And in that area, there are these magnificent structures called Fujian Talu. Yeah, I got that right. Or Hakatu. These are amazing multi generational circular or octagonal rectangular, or they're, well, not octagonal, so they're usually round or square or oval. Sorry, and they're multi generational structures that are basically little towns, and they're amazing. As you can see, I'm going to share some stuff on either side here, so take a look. These these just always fascinated me because they're beautiful uses of space when you look at them. They're ingenious designs. The earliest dates to probably about 1419, and they were actually being built and used up until the early 20th century. Some of them are still occupied. Many of them are now cultural or tourist attractions, but many of them are still used. So they're kind of built in. The bottom floor is compacted earth, about 6 feet thick, and that earth is mixed with things like bamboo and wood and anything they can get their hands on to strengthen that. And then the walls are built on top of that, and each floor has a different use. And what's fascinating about this is that the structures themselves are made in such a way that they're very efficient, very well ventilated, so that they're cool in the summertime and they're warm in the wintertime. They're also earthquake proof. But the only thing you have to worry about with them is fire. So usually what they're built is, you got the lower floors, you're going to have the communal or family kitchens. And on the second floor, you're going to have storage for grain and things like that. And then above that, you're going to have the living areas for the families themselves. And most of these are multi-generational clan family organizations. And they're all designed around the concept of closed outside, open inside is what it's called. And the idea is that the outside is sealed with only usually one entrance. Generally speaking, on the second or third floor, there's actually gun ports for defensive purposes. But on the inside, all of the balconies and all the living quarters face inwards into a communal, courtyard space. In the largest of these structures, there may be other buildings in the central area, but for the most part, it's wide open communal space. And some of the things that you might see are, centers for ancestor worship and, small garden plots, things like that. And these are farming communities, so they farm the land around them, and they're self-sufficient, which is what is also really, really cool about them. So these are just magnificent structures that someday I'd love to see myself. Unfortunately, that's difficult under current circumstances. But it's something that is just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful to see, and there's magnificent to look at and to see what is just I don't know how to describe it. It's just a really beautiful way of living, really, when you think about it. One of the things about Asian culture that I've always loved is the way that they are multi-generational living. Even today, their families are typically multiple generations living together, and they pride themselves on the treatment of their elders. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And these structures, I think, are indicative of that type of living when you look at the way that they're designed. So there you go. Those are the Fujian Talu, and which are, again, I can't express how amazing these things are to me. You see things like this in some European cultures as well. The tower type, small fortified towers that I ran into a lot in Ireland. You see the ruins of those all over the place, and they're the same sort of thing: multi-generational families living in a tower. But I think what is cool about the Talu is the way that they're designed to have this closed outside, open inside, so that they're using, the idea of being a fortified village type structure, but with this wide open space in the middle that allows people to really enjoy their surroundings, to enjoy the environment. Whereas with a lot of these medieval type structures you see, they're very closed, and they're almost suffocating in their kind of cramped conditions that the people lived in. And I think that when you look at these, another thing that I always express that I like about Asian cultures, especially, is that they're very healthy. And even today in modern society, a lot of these Asian cultures enjoy a higher level of health, and I think it has a lot to do with the living that they enjoy. And this is another good example with all these balconies and these wide open, airy spaces, and not being this good ventilation. And these were always built over a very reliable central water supply, in agricultural type societies where it's basically what we would term, farm to table, because they're growing their own food and they're living off of this very traditional kind of agrarian society. I think there's a lot of things that we can look at and go, this is a fantastic idea. And certainly in our modern science fiction and, it's not so much science fiction because people are considering doing it. There's things called arcologies, where, everything, so society can all live in one spot and never really have to travel because everything you need is there. And this is sort of a kind of ancient arcology type design because these people were self-sufficient. They didn't, and in fact, this mountainous region of Hakka is so isolated. There's no trains, there's no roads, or very limited roads, and these people had to live on their own. And it was very, very, very independent living, which is fantastic. So, anyways, that's my history thing that I wanted to talk about because I just absolutely I can't tell you how amazing I find these structures to be and the societies that built them. And I think there's things we can learn from it. So, anyways, Fujian. We'll get it again. Fujian Talu. And I'm sorry, folks, I don't speak any one of the many dialects of Chinese, so I'm probably messing that up badly. But I think you get the gist of just how fascinated I am with these structures and the people that have built them, and indeed is still live in them today. So there you go. You guys asked for some history. I gave you some history. When I delve into history, it's usually something that just absolutely astounds and amazes me. So hopefully you enjoyed this as much as I enjoyed talking about it, and maybe do a little bit more investigating, or maybe go watch some stuff on these fascinating things, because I've completely simplified this in many ways, and I'm not even doing justice to the these fascinating structures. And I hope that you go and go learn some more about them yourself, and think a little bit about how wonderful the design concept is. So, anyways, thank you very, very much for listening to another Mead Hall short. I hope you loved it, and I hope to see you guys contribute some more ideas for me. All right. So once again, Jarl Steve here. Skål.